12. That night the gunslinger used his last sure live cartridge to make their kill. He would start systematically testing the ones he believed to be duds tomorrow night, but he believed it was pretty much as Eddie had said. They were down to beating the damned things to death. It was like the other nights, the fire, the cooking, the shelling, the eating which was now slow and unenthusiastic. We're just gassing up, Eddie thought. They offered food to Detta, who screamed and laughed and cursed and asked how long they was going to take her for a fool, and then she began throwing her body wildly from one side to the other, never minding how her bonds grew steadily tighter, only trying to upset the chair to one side or the other so they would have to pick her up again before they could eat. Just before she could manage the trick, Eddie grabbed her and Roland braced the wheels on either sides with rocks. "I'll loosen the ropes a bit if you'll be still," Roland told her.
"Suck shit out my ass, motherfucker."
"I don't understand if that means yes or no." She looked at him, eyes narrowed, suspecting some buried barb of satire in that calm voice. Eddie also wondered, but couldn't tell if there was or not. And after a moment she said sulkily, "I be still. Too damn hungry to kick up much dickin'. You boys gonna give me some real food, or you just gonna starve me to death? That your plan? You too chicken shit to choke me, and I ain't never gonna eat no poison, so that must be your plan. Starve me out. Well, we see show. We gonna see. Show we are." She offered them her bone-chilling sickle of a grin again. Not long after, she fell asleep. Eddie touched the side of Roland's face. Roland glanced at him, but did not pull away from the touch. "I'm all right." "Yeah, you're Jim Dandy. Well, I'll tell you what, Jim, we didn't get along very far today." "I know." There was also the matter of having used the last live shell, but that was knowledge Eddie could do without, at least tonight. Eddie wasn't sick, but he was exhausted, too exhausted for more bad news. No, he's not sick, not yet. But if he goes too long without rest, gets tired enough, he'll get sick. In a way, Eddie already was. Both of them were. Cold sores had developed at the corners of Eddie's mouth, and there were scaly patches on his skin. The gunslinger could feel his teeth loosening up in their sockets, and the flesh between his toes had begun to crack open and bleed, as had that between his remaining fingers. They were eating, but they were eating the same thing day in and day out. They could go on that way for a time, but in the end they would die as surely as if they had starved. "What we have is shipmates' disease on dry land," Roland thought. "Simple as that. How funny. We need fruit. We need greens." Eddie nodded toward the lady. "She's going to go right on making it tough. Unless the other one inside her comes back." "That would be nice, but we can't count on it," Eddie said. He took a piece of blackened claw and began to scrawl aimless patterns in the dirt. "Any idea how far the next door might be?" Roland shook his head. "I only ask because if the distance between number 2 and number 3 is the same as the distance between number 1 and number 2, we could be in deep shit." "We're in deep shit right now." "Neck deep," Eddie agreed moodily. "I just keep wondering how long I can tread water." Roland clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture of affection so rare it made Eddie blink. "There's one thing that lady doesn't know," he said. "Oh, what's that?" "We honk-muffers can tread water a long time." Eddie laughed at that, laughed hard, smothering his laughter against his arm so he wouldn't wake Detta up. He'd had enough of her for one day, please and thank you. The gunslinger looked at him, smiling. "I'm going to turn in," he said. "Be on my guard. Yeah, I will." 13. Screaming was next. Eddie fell asleep the moment his head touched the bunched bundle of his shirt, and it seemed only 5 minutes later when Detta began screaming. He was awake at once, ready for anything, some king lobster arisen from the deep to take revenge for its slain children, or a horror down from the hills. It seemed he was awake at once, anyway, but the gunslinger was already on his feet, a gun in his left hand. When she saw they were both awake, Detta promptly quit screaming.
Just thought I'd see if you boys on your toes, she said. Might be wolves. Looks like enough country for 'em. Wanted to make sure if I saw me a wolf creeping up, I could get you on your feet in time.
But there was no fear in her eyes. They glinted with mean amusement. "Christ," Eddie said groggily. The moon was up but barely risen. They had been asleep less than 2 hours. The gunslinger holstered his gun. "Don't do it again," he said to the lady in the wheelchair.
What you gonna do if I do? Rape me?
"If we were going to rape you, you would be one well-raped woman by now," the gunslinger said evenly. "Don't do it again." He lay down again, pulling his blanket over him.
Christ, dear Christ, Eddie thought. What a mess this is. What a fucking...
And that was as far as the thought went, before trailing off into exhausted sleep again, and then she was splintering the air with fresh shrieks, shrieking like a fire bell, and Eddie was up again, his body flaming with adrenaline, hands clenched, and then she was laughing, her voice hoarse and raspy. Eddie glanced up and saw the moon had advanced less than 10 degrees since she had awakened them the first time.
She means to keep on doing it,
he thought wearily.
She means to stay awake and watch us. And when she's sure we're getting down into deep sleep, that place where you recharge, she's going to open her mouth and start bellowing again. She'll do it and do it and do it until she doesn't have any voice left to bellow with.
Her laughter stopped abruptly. Roland was advancing on her, a dark shape in the moonlight.
"You just stay away from me, gray meat,"
Detta said, but there was a quiver of nerves in her voice.
"You ain't gonna do nothing to me."
Roland stood before her, and for a moment Eddie was sure, completely sure, that the gunslinger had reached the end of his patience and would simply swat her like a fly. Instead, astoundingly, he dropped to one knee before her, like a suitor about to propose marriage. "Listen," he said, and Eddie could scarcely credit the silky quality of Roland's voice. He could see much the same deep surprise on Detta's face, only there fear was joined to it. "Listen to me, Odetta."
"Who you calling Odetta? That ain't my name."
"Shut up, bitch," the gunslinger said in a growl. And then, reverting to that same silken voice, "If you hear me, and if you can control her at all—"
"Why you talking at me that way? Why you talking like you was talking to somebody else? You quit that honky jive. You just quit it now, you hear me?"
"Keep her shut up. I can gag her, but I don't want to do that. A hard gag is a dangerous business. People choke."
"You quit it, you honky bullshit voodoo mother!"
"Odetta." His voice was a whisper, like the onset of rain. She fell silent, staring at him with huge eyes. Eddie had never in his life seen such hate and fear combined in human eyes. "I don't think this bitch would care if she did die on a hard gag. She wants to die, but maybe even more she wants you to die. But you haven't died, not so far, and I don't think Detta is brand new in your life. She feels too at home in you, so maybe you can hear what I'm saying, and maybe you can keep some control over her even if you can't come out yet. Don't let her wake us up a third time, Odetta. I don't want to gag her, but if I have to, I will." He got up, left without looking back, rolled himself into his blanket again, and promptly fell asleep. She was still staring at him, eyes wide, nostrils flaring.
"Honky voodoo bullshit," she whispered.
Eddie lay down, but this time it was a long time before sleep came to claim him, in spite of his deep tiredness. He would come to the brink, anticipate her screams, and snap back. 3 hours or so later, with the moon now going the other way, he finally dropped off. Detta did no more screaming that night, either because Roland had frightened her, or because she wanted to conserve her voice for future alarms and excursions, or possibly, just possibly, because Odetta had heard and had exercised the control the gunslinger had asked of her. Eddie slept at last, but awoke sodden and unrefreshed. He looked toward the chair, hoping against hope that it would be Odetta. Please God, let it be Odetta this morning. "Morning, white bread," Odetta said, and grinned her shark-like grin at him. "Thought you was gonna sleep till noon. You can't be doing nothing like that, can you? We got to bust us some miles here, ain't that the fact of the matter? Sure. And I think you the one gonna have to do most of the busting, 'cause that other fella, one with the voodoo eyes, he lookin' more peaky all the time. I declare he do, yes. I don't think he gonna be eating anything much longer, not even that fancy smoked meat you white bread boys keep for when you done jerking on each other one's little bitty white candles. So let's go, white bread. Daddy don't want to be the one keeping you." Her lids and her voice both dropped a little. Her eyes peeked at him slyly from their corners. "Not from starting out, leastways. This gonna be a day you remember, white bread," those sly eyes promised. "This gonna be a day you remember for a long, long time. Sure." 14. They made 3 miles that day, maybe a shade under. Detta's chair upset twice. Once she did it herself, working her fingers slowly and unobtrusively over to that handbrake again and yanking it. The second time Eddie did, with no help at all, shoving too hard in one of those goddamn sand traps. That was near the end of the day, and he simply panicked, thinking he just wasn't going to be able to get her out this time, just wasn't. So he gave that one last titanic heave with his quivering arms, and of course it had been much too hard, and over she had gone like Humpty Dumpty falling off his wall, and he and Roland had to labor to get her upright again. They finished the job just in time. The rope under her breasts was now pulled taut across her windpipe. The gunslinger's efficient running slipknot was choking her to death. Her face had gone a funny blue color. She was on the verge of losing consciousness, but still she went on wheezing her nasty laughter. "Let her be, why don't you?" Eddie nearly said, as Roland bent quickly forward to loosen the knot. "Let her choke. I don't know if she wants to do herself like you said, but I know she wants to do us. So let her go." Then he remembered Odetta, although their encounter had been so brief and seemed so long ago that memory was growing dim, and moved forward to help. The gunslinger pushed him impatiently away with one hand. Only room for one. When the rope was loosened and the lady gasping harshly for breath, which she expelled in gusts of her angry laughter, he turned and looked at Eddie critically. "I think we ought to stop for the night." "A little further," he was almost pleading. "I can go a little further." "Sure, he be one strong buck. He be good for chopping one more row of cotton, and he still have enough left to give your little bitty white candle one fine sucking on tonight." She still wouldn't eat, and her face was becoming all stark lines and angles. Her eyes glittered in deepening sockets. Roland gave her no notice at all, only studied Eddie closely. At last he nodded. A little way. Not far, but a little way. 20 minutes later, Eddie called it quits himself. His arms felt like jello. They sat in the shadows of the rocks, listening to the gulls, watching the tide come in, waiting for the sun to go down, and the lobstrosities to come out and begin their cumbersome cross-examinations. Roland told Eddie, in a voice too low for Detta to hear, that he thought they were out of live shells. Eddie's mouth tightened down a little, but that was all. Roland was pleased. "So you'll have to brain one of them yourself," Roland said. "I'm too weak to handle a rock big enough to do the job, and still be sure." Eddie was now the one to do the studying. He had no liking for what he saw. The gunslinger waved his scrutiny away. "Never mind," he said. "Never mind, Eddie. What is, is." "Ka," Eddie said. The gunslinger nodded and smiled faintly. "Ka." "Kaka," Eddie said, and they looked at each other and both laughed. Roland looked startled and perhaps even a little afraid of the rusty sound emerging from his mouth. His laughter did not last long. When it had stopped, he looked distant and melancholy. "That laughing mean you finally managed to jerk each other off?" Detta cried over at them in her hoarse, failing voice. "When you gonna get down to the poking? That's what I want to see, that poking." 15. Eddie made the kill. Detta refused to eat, as before. Eddie ate half a piece so she could see, then offered her the other half. "No, sir," she said, eyes sparking at him. "No, sir. You done put the poison into the end, one you trying to give me." Without saying anything, Eddie took the rest of the piece, put it in his mouth, chewed, swallowed. "Don't mean a thing," Detta said sulkily. "Leave me alone, gray meat." Eddie wouldn't. He brought her another piece. "You tear it in half. Give me whichever you want. I'll eat it, then you eat the rest." "Ain't falling for none of your honky tricks, Miss Charlie. Get away from me is what I said, and get away from me is what I meant." 16. She did not scream in the night, but she was still there the next morning. 17. That day they made only 2 miles, although Detta made no effort to upset her chair. Eddie thought she might be growing too weak for acts of attempted sabotage. Or perhaps she had seen there was really no need for them. 3 fatal factors were drawing inexorably together. Eddie's weariness, the terrain, which after endless days of sameness was finally beginning to change, and Roland's deteriorating condition. There were less sand traps, but that was cold comfort. The ground was becoming grainier, more and more like cheap and unprofitable soil, and less like sand. In places, bunches of weeds grew, looking almost ashamed to be there, and there were so many large rocks now jutting from this odd combination of sand and soil that Eddie found himself detouring around them, as he had previously tried to detour the lady's chair around the sand traps. And soon enough he saw there would be no beach left at all. The hills, brown and cheerless things, were drawing steadily closer. Eddie could see the ravines which curled between them, looking like chops made by an awkward giant wielding a blunt cleaver. That night, before falling asleep, he heard what sounded like a very large cat squalling far up in one of them. The beach had seemed endless, but he was coming to realize it had an end after all. Somewhere up ahead, those hills were simply going to squeeze it out of existence. The eroded hills would march down to the sea and then into it, where they might become first a cape or peninsula of sorts, and then a series of archipelagos. That worried him, but Roland's condition worried him more. This time the gunslinger seemed not so much to be burning as fading, losing himself, becoming transparent. The red lines had appeared again, marching relentlessly up the underside of his right arm toward the elbow. For the last 2 days, Eddie had looked constantly ahead, squinting into the distance, hoping to see the door, the magic door. For the last 2 days, he had waited for Odetta to reappear. Neither had appeared. Before falling asleep that night, 2 terrible thoughts came to him, like some joke with a double punchline. What if there was no door? What if Odetta Holmes was dead? 18. "Rise and shine, mother!" Detta screeched him out of unconsciousness. "I think it just be you and me now, honey child. Think your friend done finally passed on. I think your friend be poking the devil down in hell." Eddie looked at the rolled, huddled shape of Roland, and for one terrible moment he thought the bitch was right. Then the gunslinger stirred, moaned furrily, and pawed himself into a sitting position. "Well, looky here." Detta had screamed so much that now there were moments when her voice disappeared almost entirely, becoming no more than a weird whisper, like winter wind under a door. "I thought you was dead, Mr. Man." Roland was getting slowly to his feet. He still looked to Eddie like a man using the rungs of an invisible ladder to make it. Eddie felt an angry sort of pity, and this was a familiar emotion, oddly nostalgic. After a moment he understood. It was like when he and Henry used to watch the fights on TV, and one fighter would hurt the other, hurt him terribly, again and again, and the crowd would be screaming for blood, and Henry would be screaming for blood. But Eddie only sat there, feeling that angry pity, that dumb disgust.
He'd sat there sending thought waves at the referee. "Stop it, man. Are you fucking blind? He's dying out there. Dying. Stop the fucking fight." There was no way to stop this one. Roland looked at her from his haunted, feverish eyes. "A lot of people have thought that, Detta." He looked at Eddie. "You ready?" "Yeah, I guess so. Are you?" "Yes." "Can you?" "Yes." They went on. Around 10 o'clock, Detta began rubbing her temples with her fingers. "Stop," she said. "I feel sick. Feel like I'm going to throw up." "Probably that big meal you ate last night," Eddie said, and went on pushing. "You should have skipped dessert. I told you that chocolate layer cake was heavy." "I'll go throw up." "Stop, Eddie," the gunslinger said. Eddie stopped. The woman in the chair suddenly twisted galvanically, as if an electric shock had run through her. Her eyes popped wide open, glaring at nothing. "I broke your plate, you stinking old blue lady!" she screamed. "I broke it, and I'm fucking glad I did." She suddenly slumped forward in her chair. If not for the rope, she would have fallen out of it. "Christ, she's dead. She's had a stroke and she's dead," Eddie thought. He started around the chair, remembered how sly and tricksy she could be, and stopped as suddenly as he had started. He looked at Roland. Roland looked back at him evenly, his eyes giving away not a thing. Then she moaned. Her eyes opened. Her eyes. Odetta's eyes. "Dear God, I fainted again, haven't I?" she said. "I'm sorry you had to tie me in. My stupid legs. I think I could sit up a little if you—" That was when Roland's own legs slowly came unhinged, and he swooned, some 30 miles south of the place where the Western Sea's beach came to an end. Reshuffle. 1. To Eddie Dean, he and the lady no longer seemed to be trudging or even walking up what remained of the beach. They seemed to be flying. Odetta Holmes still neither liked nor trusted Roland, that was clear. But she recognized how desperate his condition had become and responded to that. Now, instead of pushing a dead clump of steel and rubber to which a human body just happened to be attached, Eddie felt almost as if he were pushing a glider. "Go with her. Before I was watching out for you, and that was important. Now I'll only slow you down." He came to realize how right the gunslinger was almost at once. Eddie pushed the chair, Odetta pumped it. One of the gunslinger's revolvers was stuck in the waistband of Eddie's pants. "Do you remember when I told you to be on your guard and you weren't?" "Yes. I'm telling you again. Be on your guard, every moment. If her other comes back, don't wait even a second. Brain her." "What if I kill her?" "Then it's the end. But if she kills you, that's the end too. And if she comes back, she'll try. She'll try." Eddie hadn't wanted to leave him. It wasn't just that cat scream in the night, although he kept thinking about it. It was simply that Roland had become his only touchstone in this world. He and Odetta didn't belong here. Still, he realized that the gunslinger had been right. "Do you want to rest?" he asked Odetta. "There's more food, a little." "Not yet," she answered, although her voice sounded tired. "Soon." "All right, but at least stop pumping. You're weak. Your stomach, you know." "All right." She turned, her face gleaming with sweat, and favored him with a smile that both weakened and strengthened him. He would have died for such a smile, and thought he would if circumstances demanded. He hoped to Christ circumstances wouldn't, but it certainly wasn't out of the question. Time had become something so crucial it screamed. She put her hands in her lap, and he went on pushing. The tracks the chair left behind were now dimmer. The beach had become steadily firmer, but it was also littered with rubble that could cause an accident. You wouldn't have to help one happen at the speed they were going.
A really bad accident might hurt Odetta, and that would be bad. Such an accident could also wreck the chair, and that would be bad for them and probably worse for the gunslinger, who would almost surely die alone. And if Roland died, they would be trapped in this world forever. With Roland too sick and weak to walk, Eddie had been forced to face one simple fact. There were 3 people here, and 2 of them were cripples. So what hope, what chance was there? The chair. The chair was the hope, the whole hope, and nothing but the hope. So help them, God. 2. The gunslinger had regained consciousness shortly after Eddie dragged him into the shade of a rock outcropping. His face, where it was not ashy, was a hectic red. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His right arm was a network of twisting red lines. "Feed her," he croaked at Eddie. "You never mind me. I'll be all right. Feed her. She'll eat now, I think, and you'll need her strength." "Roland, what if she's just pretending to be?" the gunslinger gestured impatiently. "She's not pretending to be anything except alone in her body. I know it, and you do too. It's in her face. Feed her for the sake of your father, and while she eats, come back to me. Every minute counts now. Every second." Eddie got up, and the gunslinger pulled him back with his left hand. Sick or not, his strength was still there. "And say nothing about the other. Whatever she tells you, however she explains, don't contradict her." "Why?" "I don't know. I just know it's wrong. Now do as I say, and don't waste any more time." Odetta had been sitting in her chair, looking out at the sea with an expression of mild and bemused amazement. When Eddie offered her the chunks of lobster left over from the previous night, she smiled ruefully. "I would if I could," she said, "but you know what happens." Eddie, who had no idea what she was talking about, could only shrug and say, "It wouldn't hurt to try again, Odetta. You need to eat, you know. We've got to go as fast as we can." She laughed a little and touched his hand. He felt something like an electric charge jump from her to him. And it was her, Odetta. He knew it as well as Roland did. "I love you, Eddie. You have tried so hard, been so patient. So has he." She nodded toward the place where the gunslinger lay propped against the rocks, watching. "But he is a hard man to love." "Yeah, don't I know it?" "I'll try one more time. For you." She smiled, and he felt all the world move for her, because of her. And he thought, "Please, God, I have never had much, so please don't take her away from me again. Please." She took the chunks of lobster meat, wrinkled her nose in a rueful, comic expression, and looked up at him. "Must I?" "Just give it a shot," he said. "I never ate scallops again," she said. "Pardon?" "I thought I told you." "You might have," he said, and gave a little nervous laugh. What the gunslinger had said about not letting her know about the other loomed very large inside his mind just then. "We had them for dinner one night when I was 10 or 11. I hated the way they tasted, like little rubber balls, and later I vomited them up. I never ate them again. But," she sighed, "as you say, I'll give it a shot." She put a piece in her mouth like a child taking a spoonful of medicine she knows will taste nasty. She chewed slowly at first, then more rapidly. She swallowed, took another piece, chewed, swallowed, another. Now she was nearly wolfing it. "Whoa, slow down," Eddie said. "It must be another kind. That's it, of course it is." She looked at Eddie shiningly. "We've moved further up the beach, and the species has changed. I'm no longer allergic, it seems. It doesn't taste nasty like it did before. And I did try to keep it down, didn't I?" She looked at him nakedly. "I tried very hard." "Yeah." To himself, he sounded like a radio broadcasting a very distant signal. "She thinks she's been eating every day and then upchucking everything. She thinks that's why she's so weak. Christ almighty." "Yeah, you tried like hell." "It tastes," these words were hard to pick up because her mouth was full, "it tastes so good." She laughed. The sound was delicate and lovely.
It's going to stay down. I'm going to take nourishment. I know it. I feel it. Just don't overdo it, he cautioned, and gave her one of the water skins. You're not used to it, all that... He swallowed, and there was an audible to him at least, click in his throat. All that throwing up. Yes. I need to talk to Roland for a few minutes. All right. But before he could go, she grasped his hand again. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you for being so patient. And thank him. She paused gravely. Thank him, and don't tell him that he scares me. I won't, Eddie had said, and went back to the Gunslinger. 3. Even when she wasn't pushing, Odetta was a help. She navigated with the prescience of a woman who has spent a long time weaving a wheelchair through a world that would not acknowledge handicapped people such as she for years to come. Left, she'd call, and Eddie would gee to the left, gliding past a rock snarling out of the pasty grit like a decayed fang. On his own he might have seen it, or maybe not. Right, she called, and Eddie hawed right, barely missing one of the increasingly rare sand traps. They finally stopped, and Eddie lay down, breathing hard. Sleep, Odetta said. An hour, I'll wake you. Eddie looked at her. I'm not lying. I observed your friend's condition, Eddie. He's not exactly my friend, you know, and I know how important time is. I won't let you sleep longer than an hour out of a misguided sense of mercy. I can tell the sun quite well. You won't do that man any good by wearing yourself out, will you? No, he said, thinking, but you don't understand. If I sleep and Detta Walker comes back, sleep, Eddie, she said. And since Eddie was too weary and too much in love to do other than trust her, he did. He slept, and she woke him when she said she would, and she was still Odetta, and they went on, and now she was pumping again, helping. They raced up the diminishing beach toward the door Eddie kept frantically looking for, and kept not seeing. 4. When he left Odetta eating her first meal in days and went back to the Gunslinger, Roland seemed a little better. Hunker down, he said to Eddie. Eddie hunkered. Leave me the skin that's half full, all I need. Take her to the door. What if I don't find it? You'll find it. The first 2 were there, this one will be 2. If you get there before sundown tonight, wait for dark, and then kill double. You'll need to leave her food and make sure she's sheltered as well as she can be. If you don't reach it tonight, kill triple. Here. He handed over one of his guns. Eddie took it with respect, surprised, as before, by how heavy it was. I thought the shells were all loses. Probably are. But I've loaded with the ones I believe were wetted least. 3 from the buckle side of the left belt, 3 from the buckle side of the right. 1 may fire, 2 if you're lucky. Don't try them on the crawlies. His eyes considered Eddie briefly. There may be other things out there. You heard it too, didn't you? If you mean something yowling in the hills, yes. If you mean the bugger man, as your eyes say, no. I heard a wildcat in the breaks, that's all, maybe with a voice 4 times the size of its body. It may be nothing you can't drive off with a stick, but there's her to think about. If her other comes back, you may have to— I won't kill her, if that's what you're thinking. You may have to wing her. You understand? Eddie gave a reluctant nod. Goddamn shells probably wouldn't fire anyway, so there was no sense getting his panties in a bunch about it. When you get to the door, leave her. Shelter her as well as you can, and come back to me with the chair. And the gun? The gunslinger's eyes blazed so brightly that Eddie snapped his head back, as if Roland had thrust a flaming torch in his face. Gods, yes! Leave her with a loaded gun when her other might come back at any time? Are you insane? The shells! Fuck the shells! The gunslinger cried, and a freak drop in the wind allowed the words to carry. Odetta turned her head, looked at them for a long moment, then looked back toward the sea. Leave it with her not. Eddie kept his voice low in case the wind should drop again. What if something comes down from the breaks while I'm on my way back here? Some kind of cat 4 times bigger than its voice instead of the other way around. Something you can't drive off with a stick. Give her a pile of stones, the gunslinger said. Stones? Jesus wept. Man, you are such a fucking shit.
I am thinking, the gunslinger said, something you seem unable to do. I gave you the gun so you could protect her from the sort of danger you're talking about for half of the trip you must make. Would it please you if I took the gun back? Then perhaps you could die for her. Would that please you? Very romantic. Except then, instead of just her, all three of us would go down.
Very logical. You're still a fucking shit, however.
Go or stay. Stop calling me names.
You forgot something, Eddie said furiously.
What was that?
You forgot to tell me to grow up. That's what Henry always used to say. Oh, grow up, kid.
The gunslinger had smiled, a weary, oddly beautiful smile. I think you have grown up. Will you go or stay?
I'll go, Eddie said. What are you going to eat? She scoffed the leftovers.
The fucking shit will find a way. The fucking shit has been finding one for years.
Eddie looked away. I guess I'm sorry I called you that, Roland. It's been... He laughed suddenly, shrilly. It's been a very trying day.
Roland smiled again. Yes, he said, it has. 5. They made the best time of the entire trek that day, but there was still no door in sight when the sun began to spill its gold track across the ocean. Although she told him she was perfectly capable of going on for another half an hour, he called a halt and helped her out of the chair. He carried her to an even patch of ground that looked fairly smooth, got the cushions from the back of the chair and the seat, and eased them under her.
Lord, it feels so good to stretch out, she sighed.
But, her brow clouded,
I keep thinking of that man back there, Roland, all by himself, and I can't really enjoy it. Eddie, who is he? What is he?
And almost as an afterthought,
and why does he shout so much?
Just his nature, I guess, Eddie said, and abruptly went off to gather rocks. Roland hardly ever shouted. He guessed some of it was this morning, fuck the shells, but that the rest of it was false memory, the time she thought she had been Odetta. He killed triple, as the gunslinger had instructed, and was so intent on the last that he skipped back from a fourth which had been closing in on his right with only an instant to spare. He saw the way its claws clicked on the empty place which had been occupied by his foot and leg a moment before, and thought of the gunslinger's missing fingers. He cooked over a dry wood fire. The encroaching hills and increasing vegetation made the search for good fuel quicker and easier, that was one thing, while the last of the daylight faded from the western sky.
"Look, Eddie,"
she cried, pointing up. He looked and saw a single star gleaming on the breast of the night.
"Isn't it beautiful?"
"Yes," he said. And suddenly, for no reason, his eyes filled with tears. Just where had he been all of his goddamned life? Where had he been, and what had he been doing? Who had been with him while he did it, and why did he suddenly feel so grimy and abysmally beshitted? Her lifted face was terrible in its beauty, irrefutable in this light. But the beauty was unknown to its possessor, who only looked at the star with wide, wondering eyes and laughed softly. "Starlight, star bright," she said, and stopped. She looked at him. "Do you know it, Eddie?" "Yeah." Eddie kept his head down. His voice sounded clear enough, but if he looked up she would see he was weeping.
"Then help me. But you have to look."
"Okay." He wiped the tears into the palm of one hand and looked up at the star with her.
"Starlight."
She looked at him, and he joined her.
"Star bright."
Her hand reached out, groping, and he clasped it, one the delicious brown of light chocolate, the other the delicious white of a dove's breast. "First star I see tonight," they spoke solemnly in unison, boy and girl for this now, not man and woman as they would be later when the dark was full and she called to ask him if he was asleep, and he said no, and she asked if he would hold her because she was cold. "Wish I may, wish I might." They looked at each other, and he saw that tears were streaming down her cheeks. His own came again, and he let them fall in her sight. This was not a shame, but an inexpressible relief. They smiled at each other. "Have the wish I wish tonight," Eddie said, and thought, "Please, always you." "Have the wish I wish tonight," she echoed, and thought, "If I must die in this odd place, please let it not be too hard, and let this good young man be with me." "I'm sorry I cried," she said, wiping her eyes. "I don't usually, but it's been a very trying day," he finished for her. "Yes, and you need to eat, Eddie." "You do too." "I just hope it doesn't make me sick again." He smiled at her. "I don't think it will." 6. Later, with strange galaxies turning in slow gavotte overhead, neither thought the act of love had ever been so sweet, so full. 7. They were off with the dawn, racing, and by 9 Eddie was wishing he had asked Roland what he should do if they came to the place where the hills cut off the beach and there was still no door in sight. It seemed a question of some importance, because the end of the beach was coming, no doubt about that. The hills marched ever closer, running in a diagonal line toward the water. The beach itself was no longer a beach at all, not really. The soil was now firm and quite smooth. Something, runoff, he supposed, or flooding at some rainy season. There had been none since he had been in this world, not a drop. The sky had clouded over a few times, but then the clouds had blown away again, had worn most of the jutting rocks away. At 9:30, Odetta cried, "Stop, Eddie, stop!" He stopped so abruptly that she had to grab the arms of the chair to keep from tumbling out. He was around to her in a flash. "I'm sorry," he said. "Are you all right?" "Fine." He saw he had mistaken excitement for distress. She pointed. "Up there, do you see something?" He shaded his eyes and saw nothing. He squinted. For just a moment he thought, no, it was surely just heat shimmer rising from the packed ground. "I don't think so," he said, and smiled. "Except maybe your wish." "I think I do." She turned her excited, smiling face to him, standing all by itself, near where the beach ends. He looked again, squinting so hard this time that his eyes watered. He thought again for just a moment that he saw something. "You did," he thought, and smiled. "You saw her wish." "Maybe," he said, not because he believed it, but because she did. "Let's go." Eddie went behind the chair again, taking a moment to massage his lower back where a steady ache had settled. She looked around. "What are you waiting for?" "You really think you've got it spotted, don't you?" "Yes." "Well, then, let's go." Eddie started pushing again. 8. Half an hour later, he saw it too. Jesus, he thought. Her eyes are as good as Roland's, maybe better. Neither wanted to stop for lunch, but they needed to eat. They made a quick meal and then pushed on again. The tide was coming in, and Eddie looked to the right, west, with rising unease. They were still well above the tangled line of kelp and seaweed that marked high water, but he thought that by the time they reached the door they would be in an uncomfortably tight angle bounded by the sea on one side and the slanting hills on the other. He could see those hills very clearly now. There was nothing pleasant about the view. They were rockies studded with low trees that curled their roots into the ground like arthritic knuckles, keeping a grim grip, and thorny-looking bushes. They weren't really steep, but too steep for the wheelchair. He might be able to carry her up a way, might in fact be forced to, but he didn't fancy leaving her there. For the first time he was hearing insects. The sound was a little like crickets, but higher pitched than that, and with no swing of rhythm, just a steady, monotonous ree sound like power lines. For the first time he was seeing birds other than gulls. Some were biggies that circled inland on stiff wings. Hawks, he thought. He saw them fold their wings from time to time and plummet like stones, hunting. Hunting what? Well, small animals, that was all right. Yet he kept thinking of that yowl he'd heard in the night. By mid-afternoon, they could see the third door clearly. Like the other two, it was an impossibility which nonetheless stood as stark as a post. "Amazing," he heard her say softly. "How utterly amazing." It was exactly where he had begun to surmise it would be, in the angle that marked the end of any easy northward progress. It stood just above the high tide line, and less than 9 yards from the place where the hills suddenly leaped out of the ground, like a giant hand coated with gray-green brush instead of hair. The tide came full as the sun swooned toward the water, and at what might have been 4 o'clock, Odetta said so, and since she had said she was good at telling the sun, and because she was his beloved, Eddie believed her, they reached the door. 9. They simply looked at it, Odetta in her chair with her hands in her lap, Eddie on the seaside. In one way they looked at it as they had looked at the evening star the previous night, which is to say, as children look at things. But in another they looked differently. When they wished on the star they had been children of joy. Now they were solemn, wondering, like children looking at the stark embodiment of a thing which only belonged in a fairy tale. 2 words were written on this door. "What does it mean?" Odetta asked finally. "I don't know," Eddie said. But those words had brought a hopeless chill. He felt an eclipse stealing across his heart. "Don't you?" she asked, looking at him more closely. "No, He swallowed. "No." She looked at him a moment longer. "Push me behind it, please. I'd like to see that. I know you want to get back to him, but would you do that for me?" He would. They started around on the high side of the door. "Wait!" she cried. "Did you see it?" "What?" "Go back. Look. Watch." This time he watched the door instead of what might be ahead to trip them up. As they went above it, he saw it narrow in perspective, saw its hinges which seemed to be buried in nothing at all, saw its thickness. Then it was gone. The thickness of the door was gone. His view of the water should have been interrupted by 3, perhaps even 4 inches of solid wood. The door looked extraordinarily stout. But there was no such interruption. The door was gone. Its shadow was there, but the door was gone. He rolled the chair back 2 feet so he was just south of the place where the door stood, and the thickness was there. "You see it?" he asked in a ragged voice. "Yes, it's there again." He rolled the chair forward a foot. The door was still there. Another 6 inches, still there. Another 2 inches, still there. Another inch, and it was gone. Solid gone. "Jesus," he whispered. "Jesus Christ." "Would it open for you?" she asked. "Or me?" He stepped forward slowly and grasped the knob of the door with those 2 words upon it. He tried clockwise. He tried anti-clockwise. The knob moved not an iota. "All right." Her voice was calm, resigned. "It's for him, then. I think we both knew it. Go for him, Eddie. Now. First I've got to see to you." "I'll be fine." "No, you won't. You're too close to the high tide line. If I leave you here, the lobsters are going to come out when it gets dark, and you're going to be dinner—" Up in the hills, a cat's coughing growl suddenly cut across what he was saying like a knife cutting thin cord. It was a good distance away, but closer than the other had been. Her eyes flicked to the gunslinger's revolver, shoved into the waistband of his pants for just a moment, then back to his face. He felt a dull heat in his cheeks. "He told you not to give it to me, didn't he?" she said softly. "He doesn't want me to have it. For some reason, he doesn't want me to have it." "The shells got wet," he said awkwardly. "They probably wouldn't fire anyway." "I understand. Take me a little way up the slope, Eddie, can you? I know how tired your back must be. Andrew calls it wheelchair crouch.
But if you take me up a little way, I'll be safe from the lobsters. I doubt if anything else comes very close to where they are."
Eddie thought when the tide's in, she's probably right. But what about when it starts to go out again?
"Give me something to eat and some stones," she said, and her unknowing echo of the gunslinger made Eddie flush again. His cheeks and forehead felt like the sides of a brick oven. She looked at him, smiled faintly, and shook her head as if he had spoken out loud. "We're not going to argue about this. I saw how it is with him. His time is very, very short. There's no time for discussion. Take me up a little way, give me food and some stones, then take the chair and go." 10. He got her fixed as quickly as he could, then pulled the gunslinger's revolver and held it out to her, butt first. But she shook her head. "He'll be angry with both of us, angry with you for giving, angrier at me for taking."
"Crap!" Eddie yelled. "What gave you that idea?"
"I know," she said, and her voice was impervious.
"Well, suppose that's true. Just suppose. I'll be angry with you if you don't take it."
"Put it back. I don't like guns. I don't know how to use them. If something came at me in the dark, the first thing I'd do is wet my pants. The second thing I'd do is point it the wrong way and shoot myself."
She paused, looking at Eddie solemnly.
"There's something else, and you might as well know it. I don't want to touch anything that belongs to him. Not anything. For me, I think his things might have what my ma used to call a hoodoo. I like to think of myself as a modern woman, but I don't want any hoodoo on me when you're gone and the dark lands on top of me."
He looked from the gun to Odetta, and his eyes still questioned.
"Put it back,"
she said, stern as a schoolteacher. Eddie burst out laughing and obeyed.
"Why are you laughing?"
"Because when you said that, you sounded like Miss Hathaway. She was my third-grade teacher." She smiled a little, her luminous eyes never leaving his. She sang softly, sweetly, "Heavenly shades of night are falling. It's twilight time." She trailed off, and they both looked west. But the star they had wished on the previous evening had not yet appeared, although their shadows had drawn long. "Is there anything else, Odetta?" He felt an urge to delay and delay. He thought it would pass once he was actually headed back, but now the urge to seize any excuse to remain seemed very strong.
"A kiss. I could do with that if you don't mind."
He kissed her long, and when their lips no longer touched, she caught his wrist and stared at him intently.
"I never made love with a white man before last night," she said. "I don't know if that's important to you or not. I don't even know if it's important to me, but I thought you should know."
He considered. "Not to me," he said. "In the dark, I think we were both gray. I love you, Odetta." She put a hand over his.
"You're a sweet young man, and perhaps I love you too, although it's too early for either of us."
At that moment, as if given a cue, a wildcat growled in what the gunslinger had called the breaks. It still sounded 4 or 5 miles away, but that was still 4 or 5 miles closer than the last time they heard it, and it sounded big. They turned their heads toward the sound. Eddie felt hackles trying to stand up on his neck. They couldn't quite make it. "Sorry, Hackles," he thought stupidly. "I guess my hair's just a little too long now." The growl rose to a tortured scream that sounded like a cry of some being suffering a horrid death. It might actually have signaled no more than a successful mating. It held for a moment, almost unbearable, and then it wound down, sliding through lower and lower registers until it was gone or buried beneath the ceaseless cry of the wind. They waited for it to come again, but the cry was not repeated. As far as Eddie was concerned, that didn't matter. He pulled the revolver out of his waistband again and held it out to her. "Take it and don't argue. If you should need to use it, it won't do shit. That's how stuff like this always works. But take it anyway."
"Do you want an argument?"
"Oh, you can argue. You can argue all you want." After a considering look into Eddie's almost hazel eyes, she smiled a little wearily.
"I won't argue, I guess."
She took the gun.
"Please be as quick as you can."
"I will." He kissed her again, hurriedly this time, and almost told her to be careful. But seriously, folks, how careful could she be with the situation what it was? He picked his way back down the slope through the deepening shadows. The lobstrosities weren't out yet, but they would be putting in their nightly appearance soon, and looked at the words written upon the door again. The same chill rose in his flesh. They were apt, those words. God, they were so apt. Then he looked back up the slope. For a moment he couldn't see her, and then he saw something move, the lighter brown of one palm. She was waving. He waved back, then turned the wheelchair and began to run with it tipped up in front of him so the smaller, more delicate front wheels would be off the ground. He ran south, back the way he had come. For the first half hour or so his shadow ran with him, the improbable shadow of a scrawny giant tacked to the soles of his sneakers and stretching long yards to the east. Then the sun went down, his shadow was gone, and the lobstrosities began to tumble out of the waves. It was 10 minutes or so after he heard the first of their buzzing cries when he looked up and saw the evening star glowing calmly against the dark blue velvet of the sky. Heavenly shades of night are falling. It's twilight time. Let her be safe. His legs were already aching, his breath too hot and heavy in his lungs, and there was still a third trip to make, this time with the Gunslinger as his passenger. And although he guessed Roland must outweigh Odetta by a full 100 pounds and knew he should conserve his strength, Eddie kept running anyway. Let her be safe. That's my wish. Let my beloved be safe. And, like an ill omen, a wildcat screeched somewhere in the tortured ravines that cut through the hills, only this wildcat sounded as big as a lion roaring in an African jungle. Eddie ran faster, pushing the untenanted gantry of the wheelchair before him. Soon the wind began to make a thin, ghastly whine through the freely turning spokes of the raised front wheels. 11. The Gunslinger heard a reedy wailing sound approaching him, tensed for a moment, then heard panting breath and relaxed. It was Eddie. Even without opening his eyes, he knew that. When the wailing sound faded and the running footsteps slowed, Roland opened his eyes. Eddie stood panting before him with sweat running down the sides of his face. His shirt was plastered against his chest in a single dark blotch. Any last vestiges of the college boy look Jack Andolini had insisted upon were gone. His hair hung over his forehead. He had split his pants at the crotch. The bluish-purple crescents under his eyes completed the picture. Eddie Dean was a mess. "I made it," he said. "I'm here." He looked around, then back at the Gunslinger as if he could not believe it. "Jesus Christ, I'm really here." "You gave her the gun." Eddie thought the Gunslinger looked bad, as bad as he'd looked before the first abbreviated round of Keflex, maybe a trifle worse. Fever heat seemed to be coming off him in waves, and he knew he should have felt sorry for him, but for the moment all he could seem to feel was mad as hell. "I bust my ass getting back here in record time, and all you can say is you gave it a gun. Thanks, man. I mean, I expected some expression of gratitude, but this is just over-fucking-whelming." "I think I said the only thing that matters." "Well, now that you mention it, I did," Eddie said, putting his hands on his hips and staring truculently down at the Gunslinger. "Now you have your choice. You can get in this chair, or I can fold it and try to jam it up your ass. Which do you prefer, master?" "Neither." Roland was smiling a little, the smile of a man who doesn't want to smile but can't help it. "First you're going to take some sleep, Eddie. We'll see what we'll see when the time for seeing comes, but for now you need sleep. You're done in." "I want to get back to her." "I do too. But if you don't rest, you're going to fall down in the traces, simple as that. Bad for you, worse for me, and worst of all for her." Eddie stood for a moment, undecided. "You made good time," the Gunslinger conceded. He squinted at the sun. "It's 4, maybe a quarter past. You sleep 5, maybe 7 hours, and it'll be full dark. 4 hours. All right. Until after dark. I think that's the important thing. Then you eat, then we move. You eat too." That faint smile again. "I'll try." He looked at Eddie calmly. "Your life is in my hands now. I suppose you know that." "Yes." I kidnapped you. Yes. Do you want to kill me? If you do, do it now rather than subject any of us to. His breath whistled out softly. Eddie heard his chest rattling and cared very little for the sound. To any further discomfort, he finished. I don't want to kill you. Then, he was interrupted by a sudden, harsh burst of coughing. Lie down, he finished. Eddie did. Sleep did not drift upon him, as it sometimes did, but seized him with the rough hands of a lover who is awkward in her eagerness. He heard, or perhaps this was only a dream, Roland saying, "But you shouldn't have given her the gun," and then he was simply in the dark for an unknown time. And then Roland was shaking him awake, and when he finally sat up, all there seemed to be in his body was pain and weight. His muscles had turned into rusty winches and pulleys in a deserted building. His first effort to get to his feet didn't work. He thumped heavily back to the sand. He managed it on the second try, but he felt as if it might take him 20 minutes just to perform such a simple act as turning around, and it would hurt to do it. Roland's eyes were on him, questioning. Are you ready? Eddie nodded. Yes, are you? Yes. Can you? Yes. So they ate, and then Eddie began his third and last trip along this cursed stretch of beach. 12. They rolled a good stretch that night, but Eddie was still dully disappointed when the gunslinger called a halt. He offered no disagreement because he was simply too weary to go on without rest, but he had hoped to get further. The weight, that was the big problem. Compared to Odetta, pushing Roland was like pushing a load of iron bars. Eddie slept 4 more hours before dawn, woke with the sun coming over the eroding hills, which were all that remained of the mountains, and listened to the gunslinger coughing. It was a weak cough, full of rails, the cough of an old man who may be coming down with pneumonia. Their eyes met. Roland's coughing spasm turned into a laugh. I'm not done yet, Eddie, no matter how I sound. Are you? Eddie thought of Odetta's eyes and shook his head. Not done, but I could use a cheeseburger and a bud. Bud? The gunslinger said doubtfully, thinking of apple trees and the spring flowers in the Royal Court gardens. Never mind. Hop in, my man. No 4 on the floor, no T-top, but we're going to roll some miles just the same. And they did. But when sunset came on the second day following his leave-taking of Odetta, they were still only drawing near the place of the third door. Eddie lay down, meaning to crash for another 4 hours, but the screaming cry of one of those cats jerked him out of sleep after only 2 hours, his heart thumping. God, the thing sounded fucking huge. He saw the gunslinger up on one elbow, his eyes gleaming in the dark. You ready? Eddie asked. He got slowly to his feet, grinning with pain. Are you? Roland asked again, very softly. Eddie twisted his back, producing a series of pops like a string of tiny firecrackers. Yeah, but I could really get behind that cheeseburger. I thought chicken was what you wanted. Eddie groaned. Cut me a break, man. The third door was in plain view by the time the sun cleared the hills. 2 hours later, they reached it. All together again, Eddie thought, ready to drop to the sand. But that was apparently not so. There was no sign of Odetta Holmes. No sign at all. 13. Odetta! Eddie screamed, and now his voice was broken and hoarse as the voice of Odetta's other had been. There wasn't even an echo in return, something he might at least have mistaken for Odetta's voice. These low, eroded hills would not bounce sound. There was only the crash of the waves, much louder in this tight arrowhead of land, the rhythmic, hollow boom of surf crashing to the end of some tunnel it had dug in the friable rock, and the steady keening of the wind.
"Odetta!"
This time he screamed so loudly his voice broke, and for a moment something sharp like a jag of fishbone tore at his vocal cords. His eyes scanned the hills frantically, looking for the lighter patch of brown that would be her palm, looking for movement as she stood up, looking, God forgive him, for bright splashes of blood on roan-colored rock. He found himself wondering what he would do if he saw that last, or found the revolver, now with deep tooth marks driven into the smooth sandalwood of the grips. The sight of something like that might drive him into hysteria, might even run him crazy. But he looked for it, or something just the same. His eyes saw nothing. His ears brought not the faintest returning cry. The gunslinger, meanwhile, had been studying the third door. He had expected a single word, the word the man in black had used as he turned the sixth tarot card at the dusty Golgotha where they had held palaver. "Death," Walter had said, "but not for you, gunslinger." There was not one word writ upon this door, but two, and neither of them was death. He read it again, lips moving soundlessly. The pusher. Yet it means death, Roland thought, and knew it was so. What made him look around was the sound of Eddie's voice moving away. Eddie had begun to climb the first slope, still calling Odetta's name. For a moment Roland considered just letting him go. He might find her, might even find her alive, not too badly hurt, and still herself. He supposed the two of them might even make a life of sorts for themselves here, that Eddie's love for Odetta and hers for him might somehow smother the nightshade who called herself Detta Walker. Yes, between the two of them he supposed it was possible that Detta might simply be squeezed to death. He was a romantic in his own harsh way. Yet he was also realist enough to know that sometimes love actually did conquer all. As for himself, even if he was able to get the drugs from Eddie's world, which had almost cured him before, would they be able to cure him this time, or even make a start? He was now very sick, and he found himself wondering if perhaps things hadn't gone too far. His arms and legs ached, his head thudded, his chest was heavy and full of snot. When he coughed, there was a painful grating in his left side, as if ribs were broken there. His left ear flamed. Perhaps, he thought, the time had come to end it, to just cry off. At this, everything in him rose up in protest. "Eddie!" he cried, and there was no cough now. His voice was deep and powerful. Eddie turned, one foot on raw dirt, the other braced on a jutting spar of rock. "Go on," he said, and made a curious little sweeping gesture with his hand, a gesture that said he wanted to be rid of the gunslinger so he could be about his real business, the important business, the business of finding Odetta and rescuing her if rescue were necessary. "It's all right. Go on through and get the stuff you need. We'll both be here when you get back." "I doubt that." "I have to find her." Eddie looked at Roland, and his gaze was very young and completely naked. "I mean, I really have to." "I understand your love and your need," the gunslinger said. "But I want you to come with me this time, Eddie." Eddie stared at him for a long time, as if trying to credit what he was hearing. "Come with you," he said at last, bemused. "Come with you? Holy God, now I think I really have heard everything. Deedle-deedle-dumpkin everything. Last time you were so determined I was going to stay behind, you were willing to take a chance on me cutting your throat. This time you want to take a chance on something ripping hers right out." "That may have already happened," Roland said, although he knew it hadn't. The lady might be hurt, but he knew she wasn't dead. Unfortunately, Eddie did too. A week or 10 days without his drug had sharpened his mind remarkably. He pointed at the door. "You know she's not. If she was, that goddamn thing would be gone. Unless you were lying when you said it wasn't any good without all three of us." Eddie tried to turn back to the slope, but Roland's eyes held him nailed. "All right," the gunslinger said. His voice was almost as soft as it had been when he spoke past the hateful face and screaming voice of Detta to the woman trapped somewhere behind it. "She's alive. That being so, Why does she not answer your calls?"
"Well, one of those cats things may have carried her away."
But Eddie's voice was weak. A cat would have killed her, eaten what it wanted, and left the rest. At most it might have dragged her body into the shade so it could come back tonight and eat meat the sun perhaps hadn't yet spoiled. But if that was the case, the door would be gone. Cats aren't like some insects who paralyze their prey and carry them off to eat later, and you know it.
"That isn't necessarily true," Eddie said.
For a moment he heard Odetta saying, "You should have been on the debate team, Eddie," and pushed the thought aside.
"Could be a cat came for her and she tried to shoot it, but the first couple of shells in your gun were misfires. Hell, maybe even the first 4 or 5. The cat gets to her, mauls her, and just before it can kill her, bang!"
Eddie smacked a fist against his palm, seeing all this so vividly that he might have witnessed it.
"The bullet kills the cat, or maybe just wounds it, or maybe just scares it off. What about that?"
Mildly, Roland said, "We would have heard a gunshot." For a moment, Eddie could only stand, mute, able to think of no counter-argument. Of course they would have heard it. The first time they had heard one of the cats yowling, it had to have been 15, maybe 20 miles away, a pistol shot. He looked at Roland with sudden cunning. "Maybe you did," he said. "Maybe you heard a gunshot while I was asleep. It would have woken you."
"Not as tired as I am, man. I fall asleep. It's like
being dead," the gunslinger said in that same mild voice. "I know the feeling."
"Then you understand."
"But it's not being dead. Last night you were out just like that, but when one of those cats screeched, you were awake and on your feet in seconds. Because of your concern for her. There was no gunshot, Eddie, and you know it. You would have heard it because of your concern for her."
"So maybe she brained it with a rock," Eddie shouted. "How the hell do I know when I'm standing here arguing with you instead of checking out the possibilities? I mean, she could be lying up there someplace hurt, man, hurt or bleeding to death. How'd you like it if I did come through that door with you and she died while we were on the other side? How'd you like to look around once and see that doorway there, then look around twice and see it gone, just like it never was, because she was gone? Then you'd be trapped in my world instead of the other way around."
He stood panting and glaring at the gunslinger, his hands balled into fists. Roland felt a tired exasperation. Someone, it might have been Court, but he rather thought it had been his father, had had a saying. Might as well try to drink the ocean with a spoon as argue with a lover. If any proof of the saying were needed, there it stood above him, in a posture that was all defiance and defense.
"Go on,"
the set of Eddie Dean's body said.
"Go on, I can answer any question you throw at me."
"Might not have been a cat that found her," he said now. "This may be your world, but I don't think you've ever been to this part of it, any more than I've ever been to Borneo. You don't know what might be running around up in those hills, do you? Could be an ape grabbed her or something like that." "Something grabbed her, all right," the gunslinger said.
"Well, thank God, getting sick hasn't driven all the sense out of your mind."
"And we both know what it was. Detta Walker. That's what grabbed her. Detta Walker." Eddie opened his mouth, but for some little time, only seconds, but enough of them so both acknowledged the truth, the gunslinger's inexorable face bore all his arguments to silence.